for Saturday morning satsang. Sahanavavatu, Sahanavunaktu, Sahaviryam Kauravas, Tejasvi Navaditamastu, Mavidvi Shavahoi, Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. May Brahman protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. Namaste to all. Aloha from Hawaii, where it's bright and early in the morning. We were up meditating when it was still dark, and then watched the light descend upon the islands. In parts of the world you're looking from, you're probably well into your day, some of you. But it's never too late or too early for satsang, I think. Sat means, of course, truth, and sangha, a group that gathers together in like mind that wants to share in that truth, which we call the Dharma or Atman, or just Gyan or Vigyan, if you've had higher realization. So it's always a subject at hand for those of us who are sensitive to divine awareness, to consciousness, to the subjects around it, specifically named Brahman, when it's taken inside the context of humanity, we'd call it Atman, as long as the ego doesn't get in the way and veil the Atman. So the Atman has the ability to wrap itself with these 5 sheaths of body, energy, mind, thought, or intelligence, and the ahamkara, the ego. It also has the ability to divest itself of those 5 coverings, or kanchukas, they're called in Tantra, or koshas, or upadis. They have different words for these because they've thought them out so well, and they've gotten to a position of witness consciousness where they've been able to detach themselves from things unreal, like the 5 sheaths, and observe from a distance the goings on of phenomena in Maya or in samsara. So that's what we do when we gather for satsang or darshan. Immediately we fall into that single-eyed position, if thine eye be single, to try and know the truth and see through the appearances of things, disparities, appearances, and transparencies, I like to say, which is a God blog I'm working on. We'll have that later at 10 o'clock, Hawaii time, that is, in a couple hours. We'll be looking at the God blogs. I hope you've read the ones I put up recently, so you'll be ready for that to contribute. And speaking of contribution, let's open right away the field here, the mental field, for some Atma Vichara, or some inquiry into the nature of our true self, and the subjects around it, like Brahman, the formless reality, Ishvara, God with form, and the Dharma, and Atman, even so far out and distant from reality as this world bewitching Maya, as Sri Krishna called it. Studied from a distance, we like to say, not too close to that, so that we can get into this detached witness consciousness and see the truth. Always see the truth behind the coverings. Vivarta, false superimpositions, they're called in Vedanta. So Vedanta likes to peg things right on with beautiful words and put them in the right categories so that the seer can be free from the seen. What was it I was just reading here in the Yoga Sutras? Now we will discuss concentration. Yoga is restraining the mind stuff from taking forms. Then the seer remains steady in his own true nature. First three sutras of Raja Yoga. So that's very succinctly, economically well put by the father of yoga. Even just following a few of those great words will immediately put one in the right perspective in terms of Brahma and the world bewitching Maya, which is, as Sri Ramakrishna said, like poison in the snake. A snake doesn't die from it, but nevertheless, inexplicably, there it is. So if that doesn't warm up your minds for some questions, then I'll have to keep talking. So you better ask some questions unless you want me to talk for an hour. The keel has one right away. That's good.
Namaste, Babaji. My question today is, I feel like it's a more practical spiritual question, and I'm just wondering, when there are loved ones in your life that are going through physical or mental pain, and you feel a sense of taking on that pain, what is the best way to deal with that? Because my first thought is to just go about it from how you started this class, which is from that place of non-attachment and recognizing that whoever the loved one is who's in the pain, seeing them as the Atman and not as a body-mind mechanism, and know for them through your own heart that that's their truth. But I want to know from you if you have a practical way of dealing with that kind of stuff.
Well, there is no real perfect way of dealing with it. It's a difficult position that we find ourselves in. One of the risks of embodiment, birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death, as the Buddha put it, the 6 transformations. They come with a package. So there are a lot of beautiful things to life, especially when it turns toward the dharmic life and divine life, in which you can transcend those things, even diseases that threaten your very life can be transcended and lived with. There are examples of beings who have done that, and not maybe even just illumined souls, but more ordinary souls find some way to be able to live through the pain and be productive. And I suppose that's only really attained by a kind of selflessness that is in the individual. But as far as those who are onlooking, like in terms of family and friends, then yes, you're right. It's the best thing to do is to keep that witness consciousness or detachment. Remember a couple of weeks ago, I might have told you on Satsang about when I was surfing North Shore of Oahu. The waves are very powerful, and I used to save people who were drowning, who couldn't live in those big waves. And I was more like an otter. I loved them, so I just jumped in, pulled people out. But when you swim up to them, they're panicking, so you have to calm them down, and you can't get emotional or lose your center, or you'll get pulled down with them as they drowned. So if you put that into the scenario you're talking about, then it's best to remain detached and non-emotional. not to wallow in emotion is certainly, that's a problem in the world today, is to get over emotional. Shobha, it's called in Sanskrit. We call it akshobha, when we want to become less sentimental and less emotional and less driven by our emotions. So it's good to remain balanced for oneself, of course, but in the face of the person who's suffering, it's also good to see that. It will lend them some strength instead of weakness. So there's a kind of sympathy that people use that's rather detrimental to the situation, and it's not good for either party, really. It's to take on a situation like that from strength is always the best if you can do it. You'll find that your mind will become more impervious to suffering and pain when it's in a strong condition, and it'll suffer it more when it's weak, and when it lets down its vigil against such things. So all such things in Maya have to be faced off with from a strong perspective. Like Swami Vivekananda used to say, weakness is the only sin. So it was the one thing that he didn't like very much to see in anyone, because he knew that it just was not good for their entire being. And so to become very resolute about facing off with the vicissitudes and vagaries of Maya is always the best way of dealing with it, rather than to give into it. And like I say, some people fall so deep and down as to kind of wallow in sentimentalism and the fear that's behind it all too. Quite often, to be truthful, people begin to understand that when they have a real empathy for a person who's dying, if they look real deep, it's their own fear that's behind it, their own fear of death. And we looked at that last week in our seminar, didn't we, when we looked at the 5 kleshas really closely, the last one being abhinivesha, fear of death or clinging to life. So that's the deepest and darkest of those 5 hells, according to Vedavyas, the father of Vedanta, when he commented on the father of yoga's system. He turned them into the 5 kleshas into the 5 hells, and each one gets deeper and darker than the previous one. And so the deepest, darkest hell possible is to fear death, because it's the furthest from the truth about your true nature, which was never born. It's an unborn entity and unchanging entity. It doesn't go through the 6 transformations, and it's not subject to the 5 kleshas, and it's impervious to the 6 passions and the 8 fetters. And so to always be living in that and making sure one does follow the criterion for living in that is the best way of living overall, if you're going to live in the body or in what they call relativity at all. It's the best way to do it. As far as the finer details, that has to be between you and the individual or individuals that you're talking about or helping or treating. People who are in the medical profession, who are nurses and social workers and so forth, who are working in the medical profession, they become quite good at that detachment. Maybe, of course, we're not talking about some stone cold face against the sufferings of people. There's an empathy that has to be there, and closeness that helps a person to gain that strength, same strength that we're talking about. But it's the same with many of the things in our daily life, family and children and so forth. A way of taking a strong stand with all the phenomena or changes that go on even in a 24-hour period is the best way to be ready for everything that Maya can throw at you. So it's actually a very good and healthy experience to have that, be around a dying person or help people through a disease. But it's most effective, like I'm saying, if you can do it from the standpoint of virya, strength, dharya, courage, those kinds of things. And it's the best example too.
Namaste, Babaji. This question,
Namaste.
a question came up the other day, and it's like this. Why Krishna offers help to both sides in the conflict? We had some thoughts about that, but I would just like to check my understanding on this question.
And the question was, did I not hear a question mark after that?
Why Krishna offers help to both sides in the conflict?
Yes, he has to be the perfect mediator. He's a representative of again, that witness consciousness. There's some very beautiful stories preceding the Gita in the Mahabharata that I think people, if they haven't read the Mahabharata, then they really can't explain the Gita very well or understand it. The Mahabharata has some very beautiful stories of how Sri Krishna has set up to be at the same time to be a mediator, but also to give the righteous the upper hand, and to show that, as Gandhi said, in my life, I see that there's both good and evil, but if I waited long enough, I see that good always triumphs over evil. So we can't say that a great soul like Krishna would be impartial in that way. He knows the end of an age is coming too. So he's going to set things up for the next cosmic cycle and for the end of the past cosmic cycle, so that the righteousness and the Dharma will prevail, and we'll get it'll be the first choice of the wise to go towards dharmic activity and so forth. But the thing about India and the scriptures there and so forth is that they do have a cosmology that, of course, we're missing that in America. There's some cosmology in Europe, in some of the countries. But the cosmology in India is very beautiful because there's a pecking order. And if you look inside of the mind, which contains all the worlds and all the lokas, the great mind, then you'll find out that there are warring factions everywhere, all the way up to those beings who have mastered renunciation. If they haven't mastered renunciation yet, then they're still warring with one another for various reasons. And the gods and the asuras there's really no good word in English for asura. They're not real. Demon is one word, and but the thing about the asuras is they're not all bad, like our Christian devil, for instance. Although that was once Iblis, he was once an angel. But that aside for now, there's some very good tendencies in the asuras in Hindu cosmology. They do tapas and austerity to get what they want. Basically, their problem, and it's the problem with the gods too, is domination. And that plays itself out here on earth when great souls, when powerful souls, I should say, are born on earth. They become conquerors and so forth. and those were once gods in another lifetime, in another region, loka. So when they're born here, then they bring with them these mixed qualities of good and bad. And in that way, then there are asuras who can meditate on Brahma, Lord Brahma, for instance, like the gods can, and reach Lord Brahma and ask him for boons. And the boons that they ask for are always the telling part of the character of that beings. The gods are usually wanting to dominate for benign reasons, and the asuras are usually wanting to dominate for selfish reasons. That's kind of the difference, basically said, between the two of them. So you hear that mentioned sometimes, lower gods, higher gods, or ancestors. Like Krishna says, the Bhutas go to the Bhutas, the Pitris go to the Pitris, the lovers of the Devas and Devis go to the Devas, but my devotees come to me. So there's always kind of a pecking order in there that shows that the Lord has a view towards helping everyone. And it quite often happens, and you might have noticed if you've read the Itihasa of India, those scriptures that are more story-like or have more history in them, scriptural history, not just the pure non-dual wisdom and so forth, the Upanishads and all that. But if you read them, you'll find out that there are evil beings that are doing the work of the Lord. We have a hard time with that in the West, because we're so fixed in the morality of right and wrong, virtue and vice. There's one beautiful song in India that says, the Divine Mother reality escapes everyone who believes that virtue and vice are real. So if you're really pinioned in that, between that vice of virtue and vice, pun intended, then you find yourself unable to move and be flexible. Like Sri Krishna used to say, there were, if you take the asuras and the devilish beings out of life, it becomes boring. So when you come into the world, as far as the way India looks at it, those are some things you have to be wide enough and flexible to understand, and take the longer view and wait for evil actions to turn good, and then in the other way, watch good actions turn evil. Time just wounds all heals in that way. It's always messing with things, and right about the time you think you have it pegged, and it switches like a chameleon. It changes colors, and that's the whole point of your gaining detachment, discrimination, and finally renouncing the whole thing, is that you cannot rely on it. You cannot build your house on sand, Jesus said. You have to build it on bedrock. So that would be one of the first moves of the aspiring, involving, transmigrating human soul, would be to try and get some detachment via discrimination, and possibly even bring the whole series of lives to an end. That's called moksha or mukti or kaivalya, or liberation, if you want a word for it. Strangely enough, liberation is the very nature of your soul, and it's also the nature of the soul of the evil person too. See, that is, they want freedom. Swamiji used to say, the thief steals because he wants to be free. So he's free of poverty, or free of desire, or free of wanting things all the time. So that's the beauty of samadarshitvam. That means an equal look at everyone. It's a very hard thing to master or to realize, to look on, as Krishna says in the Gita, look on friends, enemies, arbiters, saints, sinners, all the same. If you haven't seen the Atman, you can't do that. You can intellectually attempt it, but you find yourself falling off and judging and going with the flow of Maya all the time. The old habits come back on people, and I was just thinking about that last night, late at night. I was thinking about how so difficult for races to get along with each other. There's the differences themselves are make up the problem. People enhance the differences because in America's really good at that. You see, we're different, we're unique, but we're all idiots. That's what we are. I was quoting Vivekananda there. You say you're so great, you're so great. No, you're all idiots. That's what you are, he said. And he was including everyone in that, all human beings, until you finally renounce this mess and gotten that equal vision towards everything, realize the Atman, then you're always subject to the risk of it. So it's the same on the battlefield with Krishna and Arjuna. Those kinds of questions come up. Yes, Jerome, sorry.
Oh, no, you're
Go
good.
for it.
Just to kind of like piggyback into another text. At the end of the Ramayana, when Rama slays Ravana and Ravana leaves that note on the beach, essentially saying, I'm sorry and I love you, and this is the only way that I know how to get close to you. Throughout that whole epic, is Ravana really just trying to get close to Rama by stealing Sita? Is he like knowledgeable with his dharma?
Yeah, so Ravana's plan, his plan all along, it was to because he knew he was a Surik by nature, and that he'd never be able to merge with God if he was that way, then he formed a plan early on that he would cause all that mischief and try and piss Rama off, basically, as we say in the West, and get him really angry, you see. So then Brahm would kill him, because it's well known in Hindu scripture, and that's also on the mother path. If Durga wars against all the asuras who are trying to kill her, then when she kills them, she conquers them, and they become part of her. They get their salvation in her. So that's the only way some people can get salvation is by being the protagonist against divine things. Another thing you have to kind of realize about human nature is, that they're helpless under the regime of their own ego. But the witness is still in there, isn't it? The Atman is still there, even though it's covered. So, it's part of them is trying to get free. And that there are only certain ways that it can use to be a candidate for that freedom. So Ravana was definitely like that. He had planned it from the very beginning, even before the whole episode with Rama and Sita.
So is that like a message to like not resist some of our quote unquote like bad desires, and to like be the witness of it so that we can get closer to God?
Only for those beings who are under that press. For the others, it doesn't apply. They have to exert effort in the Dharma to get free. They can't use that as a convenient excuse. I mean, you're always, asking for forgiveness for your inconsistencies. There's a natural tendency in the human being to pray for forgiveness for them, and to ask for strength to overcome them. which is even better, I think, than praying for forgiveness. But yeah, it only applies in the area in which it applies. If you're not under a heavy Asuric star, bad birth, bad karma, and all that, then that's not going to work. That's, yeah. Then you've been given certain gifts, you have to use them, or else that's even probably a greater sin, as it were, than if you were an evil person and evil being, and was trying to get free from that evil by any means.
Everything that was just said just got me thinking, is the only way to truly see the Atman within yourself is to first or simultaneously see the Atman in all other beings? Because if you're only seeing it in yourself and you're not seeing Atman in everyone else, then I feel like you're falling short of that Atman that you're identifying with within yourself.
That's not the way it's not the way we look at it. No, you have to see the Atman in yourself first to truly see it in others. Unless you're a past master and you're putting on some sort of a ruse, for the good of others, it's always best, to get your own realization first, and then be certain that the Atman exists. It's going to be very hard for anyone to prove to you that Atman exists if you haven't seen it for yourself. That's why, Christ could walk up to you today and you'd want to put a white jacket on him and put him in a mental home, you see, even if you were a Christian. This is because there's just no way to see the Atman in someone, to be convinced that it's there. The human being has too many imperfections in it. So unless you've seen that perfection in yourself, then it's not going to work. I don't think that you see it in others. You can certainly make the attempt. I know this is one of the things I've heard from a lot of young people when they've come, that they want to do good to everyone, and they think the Atman is out there everywhere. And I'm thinking to myself, boy, that's really very beautiful that they have that thought, but it's just not practical. They're going to go out in the world and just get disappointed because God's not in the world. It's not in people. Listen to Sri Krishna in the Gita. I am not in them and they are not in me, he starts out telling Arjuna. So later on, he begins to change his tone. He says, I'm in them, but they are not in me. And finally, at the end, he's saying, to those who love me, I'm in them and they are in me. So he goes through 3 different sayings in the Gita that pertain to what you were just saying. So in the beginning, it's a lot of idealism, which is not a bad thing, but it's not practical. You can't go serving everyone as if they're the Atman, and put yourself at risk like that. The Atman's not in them yet to cover. Look at gurus. People are serving gurus who are, not very fine people, not very good people. So many spurious gurus out there. They're not telling you the truth. Guru yoga is a very dangerous path. You have to be very careful on it. If your guru has no desire for you except that you get enlightenment, if your guru knows the scriptures and can transmit the teachings to you, if your guru lives a pure, simple life, and if your guru is a knower of Brahman, those are the 4 criterion by which you can judge an authentic guru. Shankara says in the Vivekachudamani. I wonder if you put those 4 criterion in the spiritual marketplace today, how many of those gurus who are teaching people could stand up to that test?
Yeah, I actually just read in the gospel this morning, Sri Ramakrishna talking about how many beings want to be teachers, but how few actually want to be devotees, disciples.
Yeah. To be able to call yourself a true devotee is probably one of the highest things that you can attain as a human being, I think.
Yeah. Because it reminds me of that one of the stanzas of the Song of Sannyasin, go thou the free from place to place and help them out of darkness, Maya's veil. But he says the free, meaning you have freed yourself, you have attained that freedom. So does that mean don't attempt helping people out of that darkness if you don't know that truth in absolute within yourself?
Yes. Yeah. You shouldn't attempt it. You can hold it as an ideal, but it's not practical yet. He didn't say, go thou the bound from place to place and help them out of darkness. Is it? Or go thou the half free from place to place and help them out of darkness. It's not going to work. Maya is too thick and people are too volatile. Their egos are too unripe. They're dangerous. Until they've given the ego over to the Lord, they're dangerous. Even the good people. Look at our good Christians we've been born with and raised with, you see. Look what they're doing, popes putting on armor and going to war to kill infidels and all that. That's not religion. That's insanity. And by that measure, Sri Krishna didn't put on armor and go to war. He drove Arjuna's chariot. He was not involved. So if you're a monk, like Dalai Lama had to tell his monks they wanted to fight the Red Chinese, I mean, what a joke. Well, fight them with what? Pitchforks? Sticks pulled off of trees? Tibet didn't have an army. They would have been slaughtered, but that's not really the point. Dalai Lama, his monks said, we should go resist the Red Chinese. Dalai Lama said, no, you've given up the world. It's not your place to resist anything. You've given up the world, therefore you've come to know that it's not real, so why are you fighting for it? So for the monk, that's just going against his vow. If you're a householder and you're in the army and all that, then there's some reason for you to resist evil. But even Jesus was saying, resist not evil, and he was here. So it's a very delicate situation that has to be taken not only just caste by caste, but individual by individual, circumstance by circumstance.
When Krishna in the Mahabharata raised the wheel up to fight and Arjuna stopped him, why was he going to do that? Why would Krishna raise the wheel to strike? I think it was Bhishma.
You mean raise the chakra?
Yeah.
The disc?
Yeah.
Yeah. You said wheel. It kind of threw me. I thought you were talking about a wagon wheel or something.
I thought it was at first, but it probably makes sense. It would be the chakra.
Yeah. I'd have to read it in context of the Mahabharata, that portion that you're talking about, before I could answer that. But I'm sure there was some good reason probably in the mind of Krishna to test Arjuna about the fact what he would do if the Lord did something like that. I mean, this is back to what we were just saying. The enlightened souls, they really are not, it's hard for people to understand, but they're really not attached to the body and the world, and they don't fear death. So, if you think about it and contemplate it real deeply, that's something that most people can't possess or don't possess yet. It's almost instinctual, that you would be afraid of death. It's a part of the animal nature of human beings. But I've never agreed with scientists who call the human being an animal. I mean, there's plenty of grounds for it, the way they act. But you have to start looking for the Atman, the divine in human beings. And that's back to Nikhil's question. I mean, you're going out trying to help them from place to place, but if you understand that your dharmic path is helping you to go to work and to earn a right livelihood and to do right action and the Eightfold Path and all that, then you're going to understand more how other people are having problems doing those very things. And until you've understood that, you're presuming to think that you understand their life, like the walk a mile in my shoes kind of saying. And that applies from the ground up all the way to the illumined soul, to the adept. They began to do things for different reasons than most people do. And that's why great beings test their disciples and devotees, like Sri Krishna telling Swami Vivekananda, the young Naren, I have all these occult powers. I never sought them, but they accumulated because of my meditation. I don't want them, and I'm not going to use them. But I'm wondering if you wanted them. And so Naren, the young Vivekananda, said, well, will they help me on my spiritual path? And Sri Krishna said, no, in fact, it could be a detriment to it. And Swamiji said, oh, well, I don't want them then. So Sri Krishna was testing him. I mean, most people would love to get the 8 occult powers. Those are asuric beings you're talking about. That's the dark side of the force, puke. That's in the movies. So you want to go after those kinds of things if you're that kind of being, and dominate over others and get all your desires fulfilled and get rich and popular and be beautiful and mahima and all those things. But they were offered flat out to Swamiji when he was a young man. Sri Ramakrishna could have transmitted them to him, and he just said no. So beings are doing things for different reasons at different levels. And it applies also to the illumined souls. The illumined souls really want you to test them too. Once Naren walked into Sri Ramakrishna's room and put some gold pieces, money, under his bedding, because Sri Ramakrishna couldn't touch money. Actually, if he touched money, his hand would palsy and his arm would curl. That's how he couldn't be associated with anything that had to do with lucre. And so then the young Naren hid and watched Sri Ramakrishna come into the room, lay down in his bed, and he jumped up like he was stung by an adder and looked under the bedding and saw these gold coins there that some mischief person had planted there. So he called Naren to him and said, "Did you do this?" And Naren said, "Yes." And Sri Ramakrishna laughed, said, "Very, very good. You should test your teacher. Very, very good." So this goes both ways and at all levels, I think. This across the board teaching of actions and why they're done and for what reason they're done, basically selflessly or selfishly, I think. There in Tantra, there's three kinds of beings. There's Pasu, and there's Virya, and then there's Daiva. Pasu means animalistic, and Virya means heroic, and Daiva means divine. So Tantra divides beings into those three categories. And if you, it's a convenient categorization because you can sort of peg people, without judging them or finding fault with them. You see, oh, they're acting according to their nature, right? So probably the only souls that can defy that rule are illumined souls. They can act other than their nature if they want to, but it's all an act. Otherwise, everyone's constrained by their nature to run along certain avenues, habits, karma, samskaras. They really can't move out of that. And that's bondage. That's what you want freedom from. Everyone wants that, even the thief. But they're constrained by their own natures. That's why Holy Mother used to say, forget your personality, remember your true self. So she was trying to get people to take their focus and concentration off of the ego and its various limitations and problems and antics and so forth, and place it on their true nature for a while. And you get the feeling of divinity from that. It's an ennobling thing. And once you've experienced that, then it's very hard to be ignoble anymore. Your nature's starting to change, and you adhere to that. That's why later she said, whenever you're about to do anything negative or bad, always remember me, and remember, I have a mother. She wanted you to take her, Shardama, she wanted you to take her as your ideal for being at least Virya, heroic, because the Pasu just acts selflessly for his or her own reasons, but the Virya acts for the good of society and others. And of course, Daiva, that's another kettle of fish, all completely. See, they don't act at all. They don't have any intentions for their actions because they know it's all just a dream. They're just trying to awaken you from the dream.
That got me thinking about karma yoga. Is the best way to be living karma yogically in that mindset of that what you're just saying, I am not doing anything. I cannot, just have no agency of your action, and just understand that anything dynamic, which is all of life, is just a result of divine mother power, and it's her acting through this form that you are embodied in. But always be like going to your job, eating, interacting with any being in the world, whatever the action is, just understanding it as her power and her will through you, and that you are not the agent of any of that action. Is that getting towards the idea of living in a karmic yoga way?
Yes, and of course, it's very easy to say. You even wore me out just by describing it, but it's rather easy to say, but hard to realize. Um, there are a lot of people who say, not for myself do I do, but you watch them long enough and you find out that that's probably not the case. The sense of agency is so strong in people, and the teaching is that as long as you feel the sense of agency in you, then you should just admit it and try and do dharmic actions and purify body, mind, senses. And when the sense of agency starts to diminish and go away, then it's a very beautiful thing. Like Holy Mother used to say, I used to think about something and it would come true the next day. So they began to get such mastery over the mind that it's not a clairvoyant thing or a manipulative thing either. It's just that they are in harmony or even unity with the divine being. And so every thought of theirs is divine, and it moves with the Lord. The Lord moves with them. We were chanting that this morning. Adihi sasam yoga nimitta hetu parastrikala dakala pidrastaha tam vishwarupam bhavabhutam mijam devam swachutastam upasya purvam. Means meditate upon thine own self as the Lord seated in your heart. So if you're in realization of that, just doesn't say meditate in your heart. Meditate upon your own self as the Lord seated in your heart. It's very non-dual, and so you're merging yourself. You're like a beaker of oil poured into another beaker of oil. It just merges immediately, or a hailstone falling in an ocean, Shankara says. So that's the marvelous state to which those beings attain, in whom self-agency or the sense of agency goes away. It's hard to even see it go away in another. You really only see the after effect of it. Oh, that being is so selfless. They're so unique and so forth, but you never saw how they accomplished it. Those are all very good questions you're bringing up, Nikhil. They're very, very idealistic. You're like the hound of heaven. You're on the trail of the truth. You can see. Those are all the right things to be thinking about. And just be patient and attain them by degrees. Each of one of us is divine, but we're proving it here on earth. We each have to prove it in our own way to ourselves. But you do prove it to yourself first before you're really very effective at proving it to others or seeing it in others. Just look what's going on today with the politics and the media and the confusion over some tiny little germ that keeps revisiting every century or more. Just so attached to every little thing and so put off balance, so emotional. Very, very ignoble. Human beings should conduct themselves in very humble and straightforward ways, adhering to the Dharma, loving the truth, loving the Lord. the Atman chooses whom it wants. See, you don't actually choose the Atman, the Upanishads say. You open yourself up to it by high principles and high thoughts like that, but finally it steps forward and it chooses you. So, because most people are living in their ego, and their ego is dictating terms to them all the time. Small self, we call that. But when the great self takes over, then it chooses that small self. And then you see the transformation take place. The effects of it come about. And that's what we call a luminary, or a realized soul. So until that happens, we need peace of mind first and foremost. Nothing can ever get accomplished without karma to pay if there isn't peace of mind first. That is, if you have a restless mind and you do anything, then karma comes back from us. And if you have a lazy mind and do anything there, then karma comes back from it. It's only in peace of mind that you, or balance of mind, that you do things that you don't find repercussions coming back at you all the time. In fact, you can then, in a balanced state of mind, take care of all the imbalances that are in your mind from past lifetimes. Otherwise, they stay hidden and you never find them. That's one of the tricks of karma yoga there in itself. Take care of the vibration around you today, now, in this very moment, in this hour, in this particular period, and neutralize that through peace of mind, attain peace of mind, and then you can get at that karma from the past. It's being swept under the carpet every day and you never see it. The mantra is very good for doing that. Maybe we can talk about that then in an hour, and we get to God blogs. I put up that one God blog that is about the karma dissolving power of the mantra. That's a very good one. So we've run out of time here, and thank you for attending this Saturday satsang. See you next week at the same time. Hope to see you in an hour for God blogs. And tomorrow afternoon, we continue on with the Akshi Upanishad, which we've been kept from doing by a little germ for the last 6 months. So we will continue that on and make headway in it. It's a beautiful Upanishad. So mahalo nui loa, as we say here in Hawaii. Thank you very much for your kind attentions. And I'll hopefully see you in an hour for our next session. Namaste.